My name is Lisa Melandri. I'm the executive director here at CAM, and it's a thrill to see so many of you here to see Amy Sherald. It is our honor and our privilege to have her here with us for her exhibition, which opens officially tomorrow evening, and we hope we'll see many of you back, not only for that, but throughout the run of the exhibition, which goes through August 19th, and so you will have many opportunities to come and really spend time with this work. And I think that in and of itself is also a privilege. So I wanted to just start with a few observations. At the unveiling of the official portrait of Michelle Obama at the National Portrait Gallery in February, the First Lady had mentioned that she was the first member of her family to be the subject of a painted portrait. And it's a comment that sort of struck me, especially when thinking about Amy's work prior to that, in that her practice is very much the opposite. She finds subjects among the people that she encounters during her everyday routines, whether it be at the grocery store, on the street, in line for a movie, you name it. And what she sees in these people is something that she talks about only herself being able to see, something captivating in them that inspires her to approach these strangers and invite them to become the subject of her extraordinary portraiture. Her subject are African Americans, and she has said that her portraiture is a reflection on blackness, the, quote, real experiences of blackness today and historically. And rather than breaking from art historical traditions, Amy is expanding those traditions. In some ways, I could call her an American realist painter, and her relationship to sort of photorealism and photography is something that we'll talk a little bit more about. And she's linked to that tradition in more ways than one. But her work also serves to include Americans who have been left out of the walls of our museums and galleries. We're honored to bring this kind of transformative vision to CAM and to St. Louis. Just a few biographical notes. Amy Sherald was born in Columbus, Georgia, and lives and works in Baltimore. She has many, many accolades and awards. Her excellent work has been indeed rewarded, and just a few of them. She won the Driscoll Prize for African American Art from the High Museum. In 2016, Sherald was the first woman to win the Outwin Bookever Portrait Competition Grand Prize, and there was an accompanying exhibition. Sherald has had work shown at many, many places, including Monique Malash Gallery in Chicago, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, and the California African American Museum in Los Angeles. She was recently appointed to the Board of Trustees at the Baltimore Museum of Art. She received her MFA in painting from Maryland Institute College of Art and BA in art from Clark Atlanta University, and she was a Spelman College International Artist in Residence in Portobello, Panama. An exhibition like this takes many, many people to bring it together, and I certainly would like to thank all of them for helping us in bringing this to fruition. Of course, my thanks to Amy and to Monique for their incredible help and support in this endeavor. The exhibition and a forthcoming publication are presented by Bob and Jane Clark, and we thank very much for the support from David Frey and Nancy Lerner Frey, as well as from Ann Ruich and John Fox Arnold. So Amy and I are going to chat. We're going to have a conversation with each other, and then we hope to really allow a significant amount of time to be able to have questions from all of you at the end. And so with that, please join me in welcoming Amy Sherald.
Hi.
So I think we're going to start by letting the images in this PowerPoint sort of bring us along. And when I was first talking, we were talking about the relationship of realism or photorealism with Amy's work and a history of portraiture. And so I thought maybe you could just tell us, why is this in the PowerPoint? Why are these images that are meaningful to you, and how do they affect and inspire your practice?
Well, this image right here is a photograph of my grandmother, Jewel. And when I was growing up, I was born in '73, as she just said, and we didn't have a television or anything cool like that, so it was like we were listening to Casey Kasem on Sunday morning, top 40, that was like entertainment. But sometimes on rainy days when I didn't feel like drawing and I didn't feel like reading, I would go to this cabinet where my mom kept all of her photographs. And these are the photographs that I grew up looking at. There were pictures of my siblings, my mom's cousins, but this one specifically always really spoke to me. She's just a self-satisfied woman. I never got to meet her, but I look at this photo almost every day. But I think it somehow made its way into my subconscious when it comes to the work. And so recently, I did a talk at the MoMA, and it was on the expansion of photography, but I used a slide in that talk because I was explaining how when I wasn't looking at those images, I was looking at encyclopedias. And so these are the kinds of images that I saw in encyclopedias. These are the kind of paintings that I looked at. I didn't really understand the concept of slavery at that time. I was, I guess in like the first or second grade. But you go to college and this is what you see when you look in the art history books. And so it was, I was on a field trip in the 6th grade when I saw this painting of Bo Bartlett. And it was the first time I'd ever seen an image of a black person in a painting, and I don't think I really realized it until that moment when I saw the painting. And I tell people, I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but I have a few specific memories. One of them is when my mom brought my brother home. I was 3, and he was 1, obviously. He was a baby. But I was like, who is that? And she said, it's your brother. And I remember her taking a little bandage off of his little wiener. And I think I was so traumatized by that. I have that memory. Who is this? What is this crying thing? But this is another memory that I have. And I think it really, when I talk about my influences, this is one of the pieces that I always go back to. I feel like he should be paying me to do PR now because I talk about him so much. But it really set the tone for the kind of work that I wanted to make. The idea of what it meant to be an artist, which at that point in my life meant that I was rendering images of people. I really didn't know who Jackson Pollock was or any of that stuff. My parents weren't exactly museum goers. They went to go see plays and different things like that. We spent a lot of time in church. So this painting really changed my life. It's called Object Permanence. And then we're just gonna keep going?
Yeah, keep going, and then I want to get into this sort of the black and white and the grisaille. Okay, so this is an image most of you might know. It's Frederick Douglass. And I came across these images about a year into this body of work. So I was already painting in gray. I'd already decided that that was the way that I wanted to render the skin in my paintings. But it was this image, and it was also coming across some of the daguerreotypes that Du Bois displayed in an exhibition in Paris in, I think it was 1904. And one of the images really looked like a painting that I had made of a black man. He had on a suit, a bow tie. He was holding a fedora with a rabbit in it. And there was a similar photograph, a headshot of a gentleman dressed similarly. That was in this exhibition. And for me, it was a really affirming moment because I realized that we both had the same purpose, and that was really putting out a corrective narrative. Those images were about Georgia Negroes in the South post-Civil War, and they were just images of black people being black. They were playing the piano, they were riding horses, they were dressed up beautifully and presenting themselves, and they became authors of their own narrative in a way. So I really connected to that.
So the quote from you that has often been requoted in trying to describe these works where, regardless of the background or the costume or the choice of what they're wearing, that the skin is always rendered, like a black and white photograph. And you've said that you wanted to take color out of race. And you're also talking about this idea of, regularness, right? That there isn't anything extraordinary about a painting or a photograph or a work with a black subject that's doing like normal things. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, making the skin black and white in some ways takes those figures out of what we think of as snapshot reality, mm-hmm. and yet it's also universal. Mm-hmm. So what was that initial impetus for you to decide to make these kind of gray and white renderings, particularly given how much you do work with color in the rest of the image?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know about any other artists in the room, but usually when I do something, the reason why I do it is because it looks cool. It comes down to that first. I don't think any of us walk into our studio with a whole bunch of words in our head, because then you end up making work that's really contrived, and you're like trying to force an image into a box instead of the image to come first, and then you sit back and think about it. You call in your colleagues to give you what I call psychic readings. They come in and like look at the painting, and you're like, I never thought of that. That's fantastic, So that's the reason I did it at first, and it was, I don't know, a year and a half later. And I also say that subconsciously, I think that I was really trying to avoid being marginalized, because I realized that at that point, and still, to paint a black person, it sometimes, really all the time, it's like it becomes a political statement. It always has to be about some kind of like contention or, something like that. And I really just wanted to create these resting spaces for people to come in and look, of all races, but specifically black people, to come in and look at these images and see themselves reflected back, and like just to have a resting place in a space like this.
And so these images that we're looking at now are sort of, they've been inspirational, but almost retroactively so, because you've begun to make this change in the work, mm-hmm. and then gotten to the kind of power of these images.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we had also talked about that's really interesting is the idea of, I think you had said to me, okay, so go in the museum and look around in a collection, and what do you see, and what's missing? But that these kinds of photographic documentation of people and this sort of portraiture is what took that place. Yeah. And so then there's a desire to take this and write it into a kind of corrective history of the canon.
Yeah.
So the other thing about photography that I'm really curious about is that I guess when we talk about the kind of work that you do and the carefulness of the craft, and that it is really realist, but you had said someone had remarked that it's almost like you're painting photography and back and forth. So what's your actual relationship with photography when you are making the studies for these works, and how you translate them from one medium to the next?
I feel like the reference images that I take, if you would look at them, they look so uninspired. They're just really not that great. Even if the person is in costume, it's just a photograph of a person in a costume. It doesn't really resonate in the same way that they do in the painting. I think part of that is the grayscale. I think part of that is because I'm really picky about the people that I choose. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really do that, I didn't become that way on purpose exactly, but I just realized that some people had it and some people didn't have it. So I would ask somebody, I would photograph them, and it's almost like meeting somebody with an old soul. And some people have young souls. And as I was photographing them, and if I would start the painting, I would realize like they don't have it. It's just not there. And if it's not there, I can't capture it. And like maybe I photograph them and I take some of their energy with me. I'm not sure, but I think that's part of the reason why. But you asked me a question. What was the question?
I don't even remember. That was great. Fine.
We just up here.
We're just gonna roll it along.
So let's move.
Yeah, keep going.
So for me, these images became my version of the aristocracy paintings, because there were no portraits of people of color. And so I really related to them in that way, and it really changed my perspective on portraiture in a huge way. I just really love these. So these are Polaroids from my friend Shun Lee's project called Faderesistant. So he finds all of these orphan Polaroids all over estate sales, all over, and he's archived them. I believe they're in the collection of Kevin Montague in Toronto, but he has them posted on a Tumblr in hopes that some of these people will come and find these images, and he can connect with them.
So when we start to get to what we sort of think of as the Amy Sherald brand, the signature image, one of the things that I think has been striking, and you can't really understand this when you're looking at reproduction, but you really feel it when you're in front of these paintings, is how exactly life-size they are. And what I mean by that is not just the scale of them and the scale of the canvas, but when you are standing in front of them, you shadow one another. And we had talked in the past a little bit about this. I had called it like the cutting off at the knees, that we see this almost 3/4 view in these works. And also that in many, many of them, and we have some examples that play with this a little in our exhibition, but in many, many of them, it's also about a very, very directed and clear gaze. You look at the subject of this painting, and this painting is looking back, the subject of the painting is looking back at you. And I'd like you to just talk a little bit about that, like that choice for that real connection between viewer and subject.
I mean, I could just quickly go back to that image.
Yep.
Like, that's why. Because that's what you realize you're looking at when you're looking at a lot of paintings from that time. And also for me, I think because of where I grew up and how I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. And my mother, who's here, when she dropped me off at kindergarten the first day, and it was at a Catholic school. I was the only black kid in the class, and she gave me the talk. You remember? She was basically like, this is how you have to act. This is what they're going to think of you if you do this. This is what they think of you if you do that. So I didn't really understand. You're 6 years old, so you really don't get, I didn't really get racial dynamics at that time. I'm not even sure I understand, I just really didn't understand. But then, by second grade, I've kind of figured it out, And so rethinking that, I had to move back home for a little bit, and rethinking the way that I grew up and the performative aspects of my identity and what that meant, and always kind of having a camera on in your head. There's this guy named John Berger. He wrote this book called Ways of Seeing, and he says women specifically, which I'm like, I don't know about that, but he says women specifically, we have a camera in our head, and so like if we stand up and walk to the bathroom, we're watching ourselves and we're seeing ourselves how we think other people are seeing us as we walk to the bathroom. And I just really related that experience to like growing up in the South and like, walking into a room and understanding that people are assessing you because of your skin color first, and then having to, for me, it was like assimilation was repression, and so like making other people feel comfortable with your presence. And just doing that unconsciously for so long. And so I think these portraits, they're not portraits really, these paintings of these people, they have released that. So they're there present with you. They don't care about your gaze, they're there to meet it. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really important for me to have in the paintings.
Go to the next one.
So this is the one I was telling you about.
So the other thing that's really, that comes up a lot, and I think you begin to see as you see work that's more recent and work that's a little bit older, is a differentiation of what is happening with the subject, right? That there are, in a lot of the earlier works, a truly fantastical experience, whether it's from a juxtaposition of what they're holding or what they're wearing, and you feel like you're not exactly clear about time and place. It's surreal as well as it is realist in a certain way. And I don't know if you want to kind of flip through for some of these and see some of the earlier, like that one's a really interesting one coming up.
This one is, they call me Redbone, but I'd rather be strawberry shortcake. And this one is, it made sense, mostly in her mind.
So that's a perfect example of a figure that, either it's an oversized teacup or holding, this toy unicorn. And actually, I'm going to switch and not even have you talk about that as much as also just share with us the titles.
Oh,
because the titles are a whole different layer in the way that we kind of understand these paintings and think about them.
Well, the titles really became a thing when this painting was completed. So I was paired with, the Studio Museum was like making this catalog for something, and I was paired with a poet, and I had to sit down and spend time with the poet, and then she had to write a poem about one of the paintings or about the work in general. So she wrote this really great piece, which I wish I had here because I read it, it's just really good. But in one of the lines in the poem, she was talking about both of us, and she called us well-prepared and maladjusted. And so I'm not sure I'd made this painting yet. I hadn't made this painting yet. But when I did, I revisited that poem because this painting symbolized all of that. Mm-hmm. And so after that, it was like, I got to top that. That's the coolest title I've ever, invented in my whole life. So yeah, that's where they started. And some of them I named myself. And then I started to have my sister help me because she's a writer. And so we would go back and forth, and she would name some of them too. But yeah, I like them to tell a story in a sense. And I wanted to, they're kind of funny, they're kind of quirky, not so serious, not really heavy, but just, and I guess they don't really give you a narrative, but I guess you could kind of see them as clues, but I just think they're really just fun.
And so in a work like this, why this fantasy?
Of this unicorn?
Yeah, and the things that don't quite make sense. If you're looking at a rendering of the person,
yeah,
and it's so true to that person. I mean, we were talking about this. I feel sure that I would recognize this person on the street if I passed them because it's so carefully wrought and so specific. And yet they're totally plucked out of, they're reconstructed through what they're wearing, what they're holding, so that juxtaposition, which is less visible now in your more current work, but is such a kind of hallmark of this earlier work.
I think I really, the beginnings of these, I think I really was working out some of those feelings and emotions I had after moving back to Columbus and like figuring out, how I was raised, how that affected me, and where else I wanted to be, like how else I could explore myself beyond the confines of of growing up in the South, post the civil rights movement in the 70s. But this one is it's autobiographical. So I used to, in the summertime, go to this camp called Camp Concharty, and I would do jump and hunt. And again, I was the only black kid there. So I would go with my best friend, her name was Courtney Jensen. And we would stay in these tree houses for our rooms. There was 3 beds to a tree house. And so Courtney's white, and we had a third roommate that summer, and she crawls up into the tree house and she puts her stuff down. And we're like, hi, how are you? She's like, hi. And then a couple minutes later, she's like, I'm really glad I didn't have to room with a nigger. My parents were worried about that. And she didn't know I was black. And I didn't tell her I was black. But I made sure to hug her parents. I mean, no, not her parents. We had to take a bus to go back to the campgrounds, not her parents. I made sure to hug her in front of her parents. And I'll never forget their face either. That's the third memory I have. But I was like, got you. So I guess she figured it out when she got home. She was rooming with a nigger. So, But yeah, this image is really, I needed to work through that moment, I guess. 25 some years later. So yeah. So let's see. This is another early work, and I think this is the painting where I really committed to the grayscale for the skin. I was still working it out before.
And this was one of the first where you had sort of decided this was how you would proceed?
Yeah, this was
Okay.
it. Like I kind of knew I had it at that point. I felt really secure about it. This one is Grand Dame Queenie.
The other thing that's really interesting in these, just formally, and you see a little bit of this in the exhibition as well, is the really simple but kind of profoundly affecting difference in the way that you handle these backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So in all cases, the figures, well, not in all cases, because now there's a new painting that has changed this, but previously, the figures are sort of popped forward from this color ground, from this monochromatic ground. But early on, it was also quite gestural. I mean, you were actually, whether it's stippled or whether it's something that almost looks like bubbles, et cetera, you were really working this ground in a way that kept it from being a specific space and a specific place, and you don't have anything that's recognizable, and yet it's painterly, right? It's about being painterly in a far freer way, maybe even than the way that you would ever paint the clothing or the faces, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then you said, that's it. I'm going to true monochrome. And sometimes you wish, when you see a painting like this, you're like, I'm going to go back in there and make it monochromatic.
Not this one. This one I like, but there's some that I've done that I want to just paint it all one color without the speckling for some reason. You grow out of stuff. That's just what happens. And then you got to look at it for the rest of your life. You're like, but y'all love it, so it's okay. But yeah, so this was, I was still doing it at this time, and was okay with it, actually. And this is Miss Everything, and this is parenthetically, I do that a lot, it's unsuppressed deliverance. And that just goes back to that idea of releasing yourself from the gaze and just becoming really present in your own body, without thinking about anybody else. And at the time, I was really thinking a lot about Alice in Wonderland. So I just threw the teacup in there, just to make me happy. Sometimes you just do stuff to make you happy.
So this was really interesting. I found out today something that I hadn't realized. I was asking Amy about the photographic source material, and as you're gathering this, do you keep it? Do you put it aside? Does it become an archive? Is it something that you go back to? And she was talking a little bit about that process and how it's certainly changed now that we have digital photography instead of having to go to Walgreens to get your 4x6s that you keep. But something else that came up is that not only do you sometimes just kind of go back and think about the archive of this, but there are model sitters who show up for you in different guises that you go back to again and again. I had no idea. So this gentleman is the same as in All American.
Yes.
Which is really interesting. I never knew that.
Is that in the slides?
I'm not sure he's in the slides. He's in, he might be.
Is he in the slides? Let's find him.
Yeah.
We're looking for the other one.
There he is.
There he goes.
It's the same guy.
Yeah, it's the same guy.
I mean, who knew?
Now you know. Secret's out.
But interesting, right? That the same sitter can also take on such an extraordinarily different persona for you.
Yeah. It just, I didn't like that photograph either of him with the hat standing like this until 2 years later, and I looked at it and I'm like, this is perfect. So I mean, he had on black jeans and a white shirt. This would have photographed him in, and for this one I changed the pants to yellow, and obviously did the shirt in stripes. And for the other one, I added the American flag to the painting.
So I'm going to switch, if you want to kind of toggle through so people can see, but we are going to leave a significant amount of time for questions. So we're actually going to get close to wrapping up so that we can open the floor. But a couple of things that I think are really interesting, and particularly with regard to our exhibition, that have been sort of eye-opening, is there's a painting in the exhibition that has a landscape.
Oh, yeah.
That has a horizon line, that has, the realistic depiction of grass and land, and whereas we often see this extraordinary field of blue or other colors, in that work, it's a sky. Mm-hmm. It's a real sky. And it is, even though we're dealing in that image with figures, and they have a relationship together that we've seen in other work, including what you had just shown, the beautiful work Bathers, it's very different because they are truly set into a space.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how important it is to you to keep the idea of mystery of that space versus describing it. It's a different experience to see the figures walking through a landscape that we recognize, as opposed to sort of almost ethereally popping through this, this monochromatic background.
So I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I'm a fan of the Teletubbies. They have a world with no bugs, no mosquitoes. The sun is a smiling baby. And those are the kind of worlds that I like to live in. So for me, this painting it's similar to that kind of happy, bubbly space. It's magical. I feel as if you walked into that painting, your skin would turn gray too. It's something really silent, just quiet and sacred about those spaces. And I don't know, I just finished it, so I kind of need time to process it. Yeah. But it was exciting to do because I've been wanting to do that for a long time.
It's also one of the only images that I have ever seen of a work of yours where there is one figure who is not directly gazing back at you.
Yeah.
Which is a very different experience as well,
As long as there has to be one. For me, there has to be one.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I did that was when I painted this one. It's The Make-Believer, and it's parenthetically Monets Garden. And I painted her eyes open and close, open and close. I did it like 6 times because I couldn't figure out what was more powerful, or whether the painting needed to, connect with the viewer in that way. But I ended up leaving them closed, but I think her stance is what is, it makes it not, she's not passive in the portrait even though her eyes are closed, She still understands her presence and the viewer's presence as well.
Actually, one other question about all of these that we've been going through and talking about sort of the construction of who these people are, that you might see them in the grocery store, but then once they come into the studio and maybe you're taking photographs of them, you're giving them a prop, you're changing what they're wearing, then you're constructing as somebody else. Mm-hmm. But you had said that sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes you see someone and they're sort of perfect as is. Yeah. And can you just describe, what is that feeling? Is that like oh my God, you? Or is it...
Yeah, kind of. I met her just like this.
So she was wearing exactly that?
Yeah. I changed the colors. Actually, I changed it. But it's called The Light in Her is Easy to Love. She had on a purple cardigan, and she had on some tie-dye pants that were purple. It was really cute, but I thought the cherries were cuter. And then, oops, sorry. I know.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
It's the girl with the red hair.
Oh, right. Yep.
Do we see that one? There.
There she is.
Yeah. So my favorite place to look for people is Artscape, which happens in Baltimore on the hottest day of the year. Somehow it's always 102 degrees. But I have access to thousands and thousands of people. So I sit on this restaurant patio called Tapas and order a pitcher of sangria, and I just watch people go by and run after them and go back to my table. So I met this young lady that way, and she didn't have on the leather jacket, and she didn't have on the wig. But I contacted her a few months later, and I said, go into your closet and pull out your favorite clothes and text them to me. Take a picture and text them to me. And she did, and then she said, I have this wig. So I'm like, okay, bring the wig, just bring everything. And she showed up with a doll as well.
Oh, so she
which
brought
I couldn't have planned that better myself.
No, I would never have assumed that.
The universe loves me. Absolutely loves me. So yeah, this is, but I really related to her because when I was in my 20s, I was this chick, Like, to my mom's dismay, I shaved my head. I got a labrae. I got some tattoos, like the kind of tattoos they're like $80 tattoos. It's like, because you're on a budget. But I really related to that kind of experience of I was on Clark, Atlanta, and Spelman's campus, so I was still kind of an outsider, because I wasn't like your typical black girl. I listened to Sonic Youth, and but it was a new world for me, because Columbus, Georgia was so small, I didn't even know who Kurt Cobain was till the day he died. And it's impossible not to know who the person is because it's on all the news outlets.
Yeah, but
so
you did say you had a Sarah McLachlan moment.
I did. I was in grad school, though. By that time, I was already cool. So I'd been put on. I was no longer a country girl. I was a city girl. But yeah, okay.
On that one too, right?
This is my obligatory mother and child, because every painter has done one, and so have I. But I saw her as well. I was at a barbecue. She walked out of the house just like this, and I'm like, can I get your number to call you? I would like to paint you. This is a Pilgrimage of the Chameleon. And this one, so when my sister doesn't name my paintings and I'm left up to my own resources, I usually go to the internet and pull random sentences out of poems. But this one I named after a whole Lucille Clifton poem, which is kind of crazy to see the card next to the painting.
Your
But
label is gigantic.
it's called What the Mirror Said. And I'll say, I won't,
And this one, the title?
A
Pure.
Clear, Unspoken, Granted Magic.
And that is from?
Actually, I made that one up all by myself.
All right.
Yeah. Sometimes I get it. It's just hard though, because once I paint the painting, I'm so close to it. It's hard for me to read it, almost. It takes me. So the ones that I did name, I named her, and I was rushed to name it, so I named her Pupa, and I was like, 6 months later, I'm like, that's not a cool name. And so I still couldn't think of it, but then all of a sudden when the New York Times was running an article, they're like, we want to run this painting, and I'm like, I can't call it Pupa. So I ended up calling it All Things Bright and Beautiful. But I did an internet search of poems and tried to figure out how to put it together.
So I'd like to end our portion by talking to you about the portrait.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to ask, and I'm sure people will have many questions about this, but as somebody who talks very much about the fact that there are people who inspire you, people that you see who light up a desire to paint them, and that's a totally different process from a commissioned portrait, where you know who your subject is, where you know kind of what that process is going to look like. And yet you've said yes and no, because at the same time that this was different and commissioned, et cetera, I was still painting a black woman doing stuff.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that, the difference in what that felt like and the similarities, and how you see this painting as, a kind of completely integrated part of the rest of your work?
Well, I mean, lives among us as a universal archetype in a way, and my images, I want them to live in the world in the same way. She's become relatable to women and children and men all over the world, right? So she's in a lot of ways, like just, she's a universal symbol. I want to say, because sometimes, like when I think about like Will Smith or I think about Samuel Jackson, it's like almost like they're no longer black, because when they headline a film, it's not a black movie. But if, I don't know, Ty Diggs headlines a film, it's a black movie, And so she, I think, has come to move in the world in that way, and just become a symbol of hope. And people look beyond her, well, some of us do anyway, look beyond her skin color. Yeah.
And the other thing we talked a little bit about, and I think this is really interesting when you see some of the works that are in this exhibition, has to do with scale and the full body and the difference between what it means to depict somebody in their entirety in your work. And so we were talking a little bit about sort of the composition, and I was wondering if you could walk us through that as well.
Like from the beginning to the end?
No, you can do
well,
tidbit.
I didn't want to do a whole lot of pre-planning, because a lot of the magic for me comes just by letting stuff happen, just like the girl showing up with the doll. It's like there's always these little special gifts that I get with each painting. And so I started to work with her stylist, Meredith Coop. She texted me, like, what kind of stuff are you looking for? I'm looking for bold colors, patterns, and then she sent me this, like, really weird digitally printed dress, and I was like, I'll go blind if I paint that. And she's like, haha, LOL. So, 'cause we literally did all this over text. And so then she sent me 11 dresses. And I picked 4 dresses. And so I had collected, when I first found out I was going to do the portrait, I went online and just collected images from the first 4 years and from the second 4 years, because her look changed. She was like, really J. Crew. And then it got a little more high fashion. And so I collected the looks that I liked. And then we decided that we didn't want to do a portrait, and she didn't want to be painted in a formal gown or anything like that, because I had picked that emerald green dress that she wore. You guys remember that? And I think it was like a dinner or something. And so we had 4 made. One was the green one, which we decided we didn't like. One had a floral print on it. It was black, and it had like little ties on the corner. It was a V-neck, and it was long as well. And the other one, it was just not that great once they made it, so I don't even remember what it looks like. But so she showed up in this dress, and when she walked outside, I was like, I'm not going to photograph her in the other dress. But what I really liked about this dress was the geometric patterns. I liked the way that I connected to it when I thought about the G's bin, about quilting, and I liked the way it connected itself to the art canon as well. Because for me, I didn't want the dress just to be a dress. I didn't want it just to be a dress with flowers on it. I felt like the whole painting had to speak. And so it was perfect for me. Like, I love the colors. And it's made out of poplin. It's kind of stiff, and so it didn't read the same when because a lot of people, like everybody had their own idea of how she should be painted, and they let me know whether I wanted to hear it or not. And so, you have everybody's voices bumbling in your head. You should paint her standing up. You should paint her doing this. You should paint her doing this. And so we started standing up, but the dress was just a dress, And so I moved her to a different area. I was photographing her outside and set her on a stool. And when I did that, I was able to fluff it up and lay it out. And it was just really expressive and beautiful. And it just works for me. I mean, I like the flatness of it. I like the flatness of it. So some people don't. But it's just, yeah, it's its own painting. And I don't know. I like the colors too. I mean, some people complain about the pastels, but I mean, I think I did a good job.
And we think you did a very good job.
The other thing that is so extraordinary that we say again and again and again about your portrait and Kandis Portrait was that it was a deeply moving and extraordinary moment when mainstream media and normal people from all across this country were talking about contemporary art for more than a day. And we're really
it was the blackest day in
discussing.
America.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was, it gives me goosebumps to think about it, that the kind of momentousness of a moment like that is so extraordinary. So you did a really great job, but you also changed the world a little bit by doing this portrait.
Oh, they were pissed.
All right, so with that, we are going to open up to questions. We have 3 people with microphones that will get you. Please wait till someone brings you a mic, and you get to pick. You get to point and pick. So please, anybody with questions?
You can throw dollars at me. That'll make me pick you faster. Okay.
You choose.
Okay, you, and then, yeah.
Wait, I have the mic, so no.
Okay.
As a young artist in my undergraduate painting degree, any advice?
Wow, yeah.
Because it's a lot.
Be open to your work changing, because I was making paintings of alien women when I was in college. I think you should get a master's degree. I think a lot of people
On that route, it's just the money. Trying my best.
Yeah, I say get a master's degree because that network that comes along with that is really what you're paying for. So, 10, 12 years later, when your career picks up and you start getting nominated for awards for people to give you free money, it's, for the most part, it's the people who are running the graduate department that get those emails from Joe Mitchell or from whomever, nominate somebody for this award. So grad school is expensive, but I've gotten the money back through grants 3 times over just because I knew 2 specific people in my graduate program. Don't compare your journey to anybody else's. You may bloom after or before other people, so just focus on what you're supposed to be doing, right? Because, if I had done that, I'm 44, I would have kicked it the other way a long time ago. But it's you just have to focus on what your path is and not anybody else's.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Hi.
Hey.
I was wondering if you could speak more to the idea of not wanting your images to be passive, your subjects be passive in your works, but also in how that might relate to your idea of repression and how you're trying to not have that assimilation and repression. If you could speak more to that a little bit more.
I don't want them to be, I just really don't want them to be passive because many of the images that are out there and, a lot of those paintings that I grew up looking at, they were passive, and I think I'm not confrontational, and I don't think my work is either, but I think it speaks diplomatically to what it needs to speak to. I think they can be employed, the work can be employed in many different ways. But that's the main reason why I didn't want them to be passive. It didn't make sense for me to make, I don't know, they just needed to be present. They needed to be present because they're actually out in the world doing stuff. They're changing the expectations of people as they walk into museums, and I think I think that's why.
Ms. Sherald, right here. I haven't seen your latest work. I guess the implication is that maybe there's something different there, and I'm just curious if you've had some creative accidents happening. What do you see for yourself moving forward? Is the Grayscale, is that your work forever? I mean, I hate to use that word, but I mean, I'm just curious what.
Yeah, I think that the Grayscale is my work forever. I do foresee myself breaking out and doing larger paintings because I have a little more money now and I have a bigger studio. And so those things make a difference. I mean, like the size of the work of the individual portraits are that size specifically because they can fit in the back of an SUV and I didn't have to like rent a U-Haul every time I wanted to move a painting. So it was just a functional size, and then it also allowed me to paint the figure life size. But I would like to explore multi-figure paintings and try to do, I don't know, 5 or 6 a year. Maybe that's a lot though, so maybe not, maybe 3, yeah. And then the rest, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ms. Sherald.
Hey.
My name is Khalil.
Hey, Khalil.
And I have a question. After the portrait was released and everybody saw it, and then it was announced that you were going to work with Hauser & Wirth, how do you see or feel like everything's transitioning? How are you dealing with strong transitions and the weight of like your image and the images that you're producing and sharing with the world? And how do you like go home and like get to rest, or go home and sleep, or go home and watch a movie? Like, how do you balance these big shifts, and how do you see yourself dealing with that as we go forward?
Yeah. Well, I'm 3.5 or so months into it. And, you know, I knew about the Hauser thing way before the unveiling, but I think there's a sense of relief because of the financial gains that'll happen. I think being pushed out into the public is something that takes getting used to. I mean, it hasn't been that bad, but just developing a thicker skin, and you know, somebody told me you don't pay attention to the good critiques and you don't pay attention to the bad ones. You just keep painting. So I don't know. I really just try to take one day at a time. I try to maintain a schedule. I try to make sure I make it to the gym. I try to make sure, you know, I spend time with my dog, like the things that keep me grounded, spend time with my partner. So I don't know. I think I'll know better in a year. But I mean, the pressure is there, but I just try to think of it, it's just part of the job, you know what I mean? So I don't really think of the new gallery as like, the new gallery, you know? It's just like, it's another place I'm gonna show. And so that way it just becomes, I just continue to do what I was doing before. I just get paid a little more. Yeah. Okay, you, and then you.
Yes, thank you. When you think about how viral everything has gone, when you think about what people think about your work now, what do you hope is the reflection and the hope or the conversation that people are having about your work, especially when you take a look at the viralness of the little 3-year-old that saw Michelle Obama? What do you hope the conversation is that people are having, especially when they have children and they see you as this role model?
I mean, that Parker Curry moment was what it's all about. I think it's what Michelle was thinking about, and I know it's what I was thinking about. It's really about nurturing those little minds and making them feel like they have ownership over these spaces too. So when they come in, you know, they become intrigued and interested and impassioned in a way that that maybe they wouldn't have if it was just the same. You know, you go to even like the National Portrait Gallery, you go there and it's just like presidents and it's just these older paintings that you really can't relate to unless you're a painter, because then you're looking at composition and other stuff. So I just really hope that they feel as if when they grow up that this is something that they can go to museums and do things on a regular basis that I didn't even grow up doing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, okay. Was it right there? I don't know. Somebody had their hand up in the, yeah, you, yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
thank you.
thank-
Oh. Anybody else have it? We can tag team. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming to St. Louis.
Thank
This
you
has
for
been,
coming,
you are
too.
absolutely delightful, real, and brilliant. So I wanted to ask about blackness in your pictures and your paintings. And I don't know quite the question I'm asking, but if you were to, I mean, we're given the moment that we're living in, the moment that you're painting in, what do you, and especially how all of your faces and your black figures are so varied and different, and their presence is so different. Some of them have teacups, the respectability, the fierceness. What message would you like America to get across in terms of blackness and in terms of how we're dealing with this moment as black people? So
Yeah.
both that, but also the legacy. So as people look back at your pictures as a historical sort of representation of the moment and black bodies in it.
Yeah. I mean, no matter whether they're painted in gray or not, they're still phenotypically black, right? So you're not going to look at the painting and get confused that it's not a black person. I think that, wait, what was the question again? The other?
So I guess I'm interested in what do you want America to know about the black body, the black person in the America present?
I mean, maybe just that we're Americans too. I think that's the most important part of it, and just becoming a part of that story in a real way. I think that's one thing that really bothers me when, we have these huge public governmental affairs or whatever, and everybody's talking about the forefathers, and it's like, hello, we were here and you welcome. It's like I want to stand at the door of the Blacksonian in DC and just tell people you welcome as they leave, that, people, because it just starts to for me, it just starts to wear on me. But because, with media and with things that are happening, we're living in a very reactionary place. I feel like I am. It's like I'm constantly thinking about what's happening to who. When I look at Facebook, I see videos that I really can't even watch it anymore. So when I think of these paintings, I think of places, I think of resting, like being able to walk up to an image and just rest your eyes on it, and specifically for black people, to be loved by it, and to feel at peace, to not feel the fight, to just be present, if that makes sense. Oh, wait, okay.
I noticed you say something in passing in your conversation with Lisa that these aren't portraits, and I was curious what you meant by that.
Well, I mean, I go back and forth, but I mean, because so like this is a portrait because when we talk about it, we talk about Michelle Obama. But the other ones, we don't talk about the actual sitter, because they almost don't matter in the sense of like, this is Morgan or this is Stacy or whatever, They're sitting within the art canon in a more symbolic way. And so once the painting is finished, I separate myself. Even as I started, I'm separating myself from like the actual person who may be the vessel for what it is that I'm trying to give the world versus, what they end up being. Okay.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Amy Sherald.
Hi.
This painting in particular has taken a great deal of criticism. I think the majority of criticism that has taken has to do with misunderstanding of an inability to perceive a different aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you nailed it too. But I think there are a lot of people who don't understand how you nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would like to ask you to do is say more about how the aesthetic you're presenting here differs from the institutional Western cultural aesthetic of white Europeans.
Yeah. Isn't it pretty obvious?
It's pretty obvious.
I mean, I painted it, so I wouldn't have to say it. So.
But I want you to talk about that aesthetic and say something more about how you nailed it.
How I nailed it?
How did you nail it?
I painted the fuck out of it. That's how I nailed it. What to say?
Do you want to drop your mic?
Okay.
Hi, Amy. I just wanted to thank you again for coming to St. Louis and bringing your work to St. Louis. I have a two-parter, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering what work is your favorite work that you've done and why?
Mm-hmm.
And also, what was the process of coming to St. Louis? Were you asked? Did you decide? And if you did, why?
Well, I'll answer the easier one first. I was asked like a year or so ago. And I accepted it because it's part of my job description to do shows in museums. And my favorite, you wanted my favorite painting? I think it's the little girl, the All Things Bright and Beautiful, Pupa, but we don't call her that. Yeah, she actually is a very special little girl, and I still have a connection with her. And the couple who bought the painting even like send her to summer camp every summer. It's just like, she was 10, she was, like, I was like, what's your favorite subject? And she's like, it's math, and I'm good at reading, but I'm not sure what else they can teach me because I read at a college level. And I was like, what? And so when I went to introduce myself to her mom so I could ask her whether I could paint her or not, I'm like, so Morgan says she reads at a college level? And she's like, she goes to 6th grade reading and she's in the 3rd grade, So she's just, she was just everything. She was just everything, so that's my favorite.
Hello, Amy. Welcome to St. Louis.
Hey, where are you?
I have a question about your undergraduate work at Clark Atlanta University.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
Panthers.
Have you seen it?
No, but I went to Clark. I graduated in 1980. But anyway, I just wanted you to speak to your experiences at historically black college, which is not necessarily recognized as far as the arts are concerned, but the
Right.
fact that you attended there and you kind of alluded to some of the experiences that you had there. Could you speak about your experience there, and did it help ground you in the type of work that you're doing now?
It did. I mean, I went there because I needed to not be Black Amy for a little bit. I just needed to be around Black people. And I mean, even inside of that, I was still an outsider because I wasn't, like your typical Black girl. But for me, it was a great experience. I mean, when you're at Clark Atlanta, you're in the Atlanta University Center. So if you go to Morehouse, Clark, or Morris Brown, and you're a painting major, you take all of your classes at Spelman. And so, after I changed my major, it was from pre-med, it was meeting Dr. Lindsay, who's the painting instructor there, that really, I can't imagine that I would be where I am without him. Like, he still mentors me to this day. So I gained a lot of knowledge there about who I was. And I'm not sure it has any influence on the work now, but it helped me ground myself and move forward in my life in a different way. Yeah. Okay, wait, you. Okay.
Hi, you mentioned the quilt makers of Gee's Bend, and I wondered how long they've been in your, how long you've known of them, and how, what your relationship with that visual, aesthetic is.
Yeah, I learned of them when they did the show at the Whitney. I don't know when that was. It must have been, it was in the 2000. Yeah. That's when I first discovered them, and that's when I really started even thinking about quilting in general. It wasn't anything that was really on my radar. And I decided to go home and try to make my own, and it never got finished because it's like a lot of work. And what was the other part of the question? What? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have the catalog, and I look at it ever so often. But yeah, so they're inside of me. I don't feel like you can see work like that and know their story and not internalize it and be changed by it. And then, okay, sorry. And then, yeah.
Welcome to St. Louis.
Thank you.
My question is, you were over in Panama and as well as Norway. Could you speak to
polar opposite? They couldn't be more different.
How was the experience with working with other artists?
In Panama, I was there with Arturo, and we just kind of did our own thing. We did start painting. So we were in a little village called Portobello. It's like population 80 people. It's when I first went there, it wasn't anything there really. It's like no doctors, no police. There was like one general store. Nobody had TVs. One person had a TV, and the whole village would like stand outside this dude's house and watch television. So that's when I think about going there. I think about like my palette now. But studying in Norway, it was the complete opposite. Our Nerdrum is like a modern day Rembrandt, and Larvik is a very gray place even in the summertime when I was there. But wait, what was, I keep forgetting the questions.
Just what those two places were like, what those two experiences.
Yeah, they were polar. There was one in Panama, I say, because I haven't been to the continent yet, I've experienced Africa through being in that country. Because where Portobello is situated, they were slave ports. And at some point, they became marooners, and so they remained there. They were coming over from the Congo. And then there was also 100, 200 years ago, there was like a crate that washed ashore. This is the story that they tell, and inside of it was a statue of a black Christ. He had on a purple robe, and he's in the church that's in that village now to this day. And so they have El Cristo Negro, which is the Black Christ Festival, where people walk all over from all over Panama to kiss the feet of the Christ. And so they're just two polar opposite experiences. They were just two polar opposite experiences, because our Nerdrum had never had any black people at his place, you know what I mean? And so it was really interesting, because he one day, so he would have us sit around the fireplace, and we would like drink cognac or whatever, and like talk philosophy. And he's really kind of pissed and angry, you know, because people like Cy Twombly exist, and who if you don't know him, like you could look at his work and be like, my 2-year-old can do that. But I get it, but Odd hates it, because he's like, I should be the one getting the show at the Whitney. And so he was like, they treat figurative painters like nigger artists. The more they paint the figure, the blacker we become. And I was like, oh man. You know, so I understand what he was trying to say, but so we had a little talk after that. But so I mean, so it was very different. Like it was beautiful, but Panama was like home for me, because I've found pieces of myself there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I heard Lisa mention about I heard Lisa mention about the award recognition of David Driscoll, and he lives in the area that you reside in. Do you come in contact with him often? Can you share what that award was, and what was your interaction with him?
I met him for the first time when I did my talk a couple of months ago at University of Maryland for the Phillips Collection. And I've always been a huge fan of his work. He's just a doll. Like, he's just the cutest guy. So I've received a lot of awards, but that one was extra meaningful because it was coming from, I was being recognized by a black artist, and that meant a lot for me, because he's paved the way for all of us to be here. Yep.
One last.
All right, one more. Who's got money? One more. Okay. All right. Little girls get priority. Sorry. Say what you want to say. Don't be shy. Come on, you can do it. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. You got it. You got it. Come on, you got the money bag. Yeah.
Just tell her what you said you wanted to say.
Come up here. Come here.
She wants you to go up there.
Come up here. Come on. Come here. Walk faster. Don't be shy. And there's a lot of eyeballs. I feel the same way. You want to whisper it in my ear and then I can tell people? Come here. Come here, take my hand. Girl, you better take my hand. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life if you don't do it. It's going to be like that kid that fell asleep and Barack Obama took a picture with him while he was asleep. Okay. All right, we'll do one more.
Yeah, we'll do one more.
Okay. In the black and white t-shirt?
Me?
Okay, you. Yeah, sure.
Hi, and thanks for coming to St. Louis. I don't know how personal this is, but you had a health issue a few years ago, correct?
Like 6 years ago.
Okay. Just because this is an opportunity to ask an artist of your caliber, when you had that issue, when your body was going through that, and then the scare of it, and then having to bounce back, can you share a little bit about that experience as someone that's trying to create but is scared for their life? You know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say everybody should be a donor because you never know.
Yep.
Because I'm pretty sure that when Kristen's, so my donor's name is Kristen, when she died, and I'm kind of like the silver lining of the heroin epidemic hitting the suburbs, because that's how I got my heart, that her parents never thought that Kristen and I would be painting Michelle Obama, you know? And I'm not even sure her parents are fans of the Obamas, but they were still very happy. But yeah, it was scary, and I think it influenced the work in a way where I really, for the 10 years before the transplant, I really wanted to get down to like who I really was. And I feel like you're codified from birth, you know? It's like there's so many things that you'll never really experience unless you really live in the intersections of like where we all meet in society. And I mean, even the little things of like, what's it like to fall in love without having heard an R&B song? It's like you're 6 years old and you're like, you know, you already know what love is because Luther Vandross told you, or Anita Baker for me, you know? And so I'm really looking for a truly authentic experience. And the work is a way for me to kind of take that journey and like, you know, create my own narrative and like get to know myself beyond my gender, my race, and like who I would be if I hadn't grown up in the South, you know, like all those different kinds of things. So it really, so I took a lot of risk because of that, because I thought I was gonna die when I was 39. But I ended up getting the transplant instead. But I really didn't want a transplant because I hadn't been to Napa Valley and I thought I wasn't gonna be able to drink anymore. So I had my priorities straight. It was, you know, I don't know, it's something like some people have pushed through, and luckily I'm one of those people. And after it happened, the difficult part is that I had to jump right back into it. And it was still jumping back into a space where you didn't know whether you're gonna make it or not. And it's like getting a transplant is expensive and the drugs are expensive. I mean, like $3,000 a month for like 30 pills, you know? And it's like, was it even worth surviving? Because this is, you know, like this is what I'm faced with, and it's like you don't want to change your path just for that, you know? So for me, like things serendipitously worked out. Like I got a Paul Krasner the 2013. I got out of the hospital New Year's Eve 2012, and so 2013 I got that grant. So I was able to support myself in that way and like get the drugs until Affordable Care Act kicked in, and then I was able to not get it on the market because it was kind of expensive, but just like go to Blue Cross Blue Shield and like just get insurance, regular insurance, which I couldn't do before because I was paying $800 a month. But I never really thought I was gonna die, I don't think. For some reason, I knew it wasn't my time. Yeah, I just knew it wasn't my time. It's weird, too, because you just kind of know. You know when it's your time, and you know when it's not your time. I can say that for sure. And I knew it wasn't my time, so I just kept going. Yep.
Well, please come and join us not only tomorrow night for the opening of the exhibitions here at CAM, but come back, spend time with these paintings. It would be our pleasure to have you back. We so appreciate you coming out this evening, and I am delighted, honored, thrilled to have Amy and Amy's work here. It's a really, really wonderful thing for the contemporary and for St. Louis, and thank you.
Thanks for coming.